The hall went silent so fast it felt wrong, like someone had ripped sound straight out of the air. It wasn't the kind of quiet that settles gently. No, this one hit hard, sharp, heavy, unnatural, the kind of silence every wolf feels in their bones, because something unthinkable was happening. She was walking. Vanya Emberclaw, daughter of the Emberclaw bloodline, highborn, marked, destined. She should have been walking toward her chosen mate right now, toward the wolf the sacred flame had pointed to minutes ago. Instead, she was walking straight toward the Alpha King, and she wasn't slowing down. Her heartbeat drummed in her ears. Her palms were cold. Her throat felt tight, but her steps, steady, unwavering, almost eerie in their calm. The choosing ceremony was still in progress. The fire was still burning gold and red. Her mark still burned like a hot iron at the back of her neck, an unmistakable pull toward the male she was fated to belong to, Kalen Duskveil. But she did not turn toward him. She turned her back. On him, on the moon, on every law she had been raised to follow. And the entire room watched her break thousands of years of tradition with each step. Robes rustled, claws clicked nervously on stone. Feathers in ceremonial braids trembled as wolves inhaled sharply. Some stood, some whispered prayers, some muttered curses. But Vanya kept going. Her gown whispered across the polished floor. Silver embroidery caught the torchlight, and with every second, Kalen's expression twisted darker. A moment ago, he'd been smiling, smug, certain, victorious. He had believed the moon herself had handed her to him like a prize. Now? He looked like he wanted to tear the entire world apart. His voice echoed behind her, soft, deadly. Vanya, don't you dare. She didn't turn around. She couldn't. Because if she saw his eyes, those cold, calculating eyes, she would freeze. She knew she would. He'd spent years perfecting that effect. The slow crushing of her spirit, the whispered threats, the quiet cruelties disguised as concern. He was her destined mate, a bond she never asked for, one she feared more than any enemy. So she walked faster, past the council platform, past the wolves kneeling in ceremonial rows, past the guards whose hands hovered near their blades, not sure whether to stop her or protect her. And there, looming above all, was the throne, massive, carved from blackened oak and iron, built to intimidate. Built for the weight of a king whose presence was said to crush lesser wolves. Lucian Blackthorn, the Alpha King, a man whose name carried the same weight as war, a ruler who had survived more battles than most wolves had lived seasons, a king who hadn't allowed a single soul to stand within arm's reach in decades. Except now, Vanya was climbing his dais. Torchlight trembled, shadows danced across the walls. A storm of whispers swelled, but her world narrowed to the space in front of her, the throne, and the man in it. He sat still, absolutely still, the way predators freeze just before choosing whether to kill or spare. His amber eyes locked onto hers, not wide with shock, not narrowed with anger, just steady, ancient, impossible to read. Vanya felt something inside her lurch. Fear? Maybe. Or awe. Or the sudden understanding that she was standing in front of someone who could change her fate in a single breath. Her own breath trembled. He didn't blink, didn't shift, didn't ask why she was approaching a death sentence willingly. He just watched. And then she did the thing no wolf on this earth expected. She sat. She didn't kneel, didn't bow, didn't even hesitate. Vanya Emberclaw walked right up to the Alpha King and sat, boldly, tremblingly, on his lap. The hall erupted. Chairs scraped. Robes snapped. Someone choked on their own spit. Several wolves actually backed away as if lightning had just struck the room. Because she hadn't just broken tradition. She had shattered it. Smashed it. Thrown it into the sacred fire and danced on its ashes. But Lucian still hadn't moved. He didn't shove her off. Didn't throw her across the hall. Didn't even inhale sharply. His chest rose and fell once. Calm. Controlled. Like he'd been expecting something impossible, and it had finally arrived. Vanya heard Kalen's snarl behind her. She felt him advancing. Felt his rage like heat on her back. But before Kalen could take another step, Lucian moved. Slowly. Deliberately. His arm came around her waist. Not yanking. Not caging. Just settling. Solid. Warm. A silent warning to anyone watching. Vanya's pulse stuttered. Heat shot through her spine. The king's hand was heavy, grounding her, stopping her from shaking apart. And then he leaned closer. His voice lowered. A soft rumble meant only for her. "I won't let him touch you." Her breath caught. Not because of the words, but because of how he said them. Not as a king, not as a ruler, but as someone who recognized fear, someone who understood desperation, someone who had seen too many wolves break and refused to let her be one of them. Behind them, chaos erupted. Council members shouted ancient laws. Guards demanded orders. Kalen snarled her name, furious, wounded, hungry for the bond he believed was still his to claim. But the king's hand tightened around her waist, a silent claim more powerful than any mate mark. He spoke again, this time to the hall. His voice was soft, deadly, unshakable. "Sanctuary has been invoked." Half the room panicked. The other half tried to fight it. "No wolf invokes sanctuary during a choosing. She belongs to her fated mate. This is an abomination." But Lucian wasn't listening to them. He was watching her, studying her trembling breath, her brave posture, her desperate eyes. "You understand what you've done," he murmured quietly, gaze locked on hers. "You understand the cost." She nodded once. She didn't trust her voice. Not with Kalen's fury breathing down her neck. Not with the king's warmth seeping through her bones. Not with the weight of the entire hall crashing at her back. Lucian's fingers flexed gently, an anchor in a storm. "Good," he said softly. "Then you'll survive what comes next." And gods, the way he said it, calm, steady, almost reassuring. It sent shivers down her spine, because she knew Kalen well enough to fear him. But Lucian? She didn't fear him. Not yet. Not fully. And maybe that was the most dangerous thing of all. Because she wasn't sure if the Alpha King meant to protect her or claim her. But one thing was clear. She had sparked a war tonight. A war between fate and choice. Between tradition and defiance. Between a cruel, destined mate and a king with shadows in his eyes. And that war? It starts here, right now, and you're going to want to hear every second of what happens next. Before we dive deeper into this wild, raw, dangerous story of sanctuary, rebellion, and a bond no one saw coming, make sure you hit like, subscribe, and tell me where you're listening from. It helps more than you know. Now, let's keep going. The air inside the throne room was thick with fury and fear, like something ancient had been disturbed, and it was waiting to see who dared move next. Vanya sat still on the king's lap, her body trembling. Not from regret. She hadn't come this far to fall apart. But the noise. The noise was building again. Shouts from the council. Arguments about laws older than anyone alive. Accusations. She can't do this! The mate bond is sacred. She belongs to him. She didn't look at them. She didn't look at Kaelin either, even though she could feel him pacing below the dais like a wolf in a cage. She kept her eyes forward, focused, locked on the darkness ahead like a soldier waiting for the next command. And still, the Alpha King didn't move. Lucian's hand rested steady at her waist, his jaw set firm, his stare fixed, not on the room, but far beyond it, like he was weighing every soul in the chamber and finding them wanting. Then finally, he stood. He didn't throw her off, didn't bark, didn't posture. He rose with her still in his arms, and the room fell silent for the second time that night. The Alpha King never touched anyone. Not unless he was drawing blood, not unless he meant to break you. But here he was, holding her like she wasn't a weapon or a problem to solve, but something already his to protect. The council shifted uneasily. Lucian's voice, when it came, was low, cold, beautifully final. Sanctuary has been invoked. The laws of fate do not supersede the rights of the throne. This bond is nullified. Gasps. Kaelin stepped forward, seething. You're going to deny the moon's decree for her? A girl who defied her mark? Lucian didn't blink, didn't even raise his voice. I'm going to deny the moon's decree for you. Another shockwave. Kaelin's hands curled into fists. You're making a mistake. You think you can protect her from me? Lucian stepped off the dais, still holding her. His power rolled through the room, slow and crushing, the kind of energy that made wolves bare their throats instinctively. I'm not protecting her from you, he said quietly. I'm reminding you what happens to wolves who forget who they answer to. And gods. The silence that followed was different this time. It wasn't disbelief. It was dread. Because no one crossed Lucian Blackthorn, not even Kaelin. Vanya could feel Kaelin's fury crawling up her spine like ice. She didn't dare look at him, didn't want to see his face. She kept her eyes on Lucian's jaw, on the faint lines carved deep by years of silence, command, and things not spoken aloud. He carried her through the corridor behind the throne, his steps unhurried. They entered a hallway she'd never seen before. No guards, no noise. Just cold stone, torchlight, and the echo of her breathing. Finally, he stopped, set her gently on her feet, and for the first time he looked at her like a man, not a king. You understand what you've done, he said. Her voice caught, but she nodded. I didn't ask for the bond, she whispered. I didn't want him. He studied her, really studied her, like he was seeing the girl beneath the dress, the fire beneath the fear. You invoked sanctuary to escape him, he said, not to choose me. Her lips parted, but no sound came. He was right. Lucian turned away, walking toward a heavy door at the end of the corridor. Follow me, he said. I won't bind you, but if you stay, you'll follow my rules. All of them. Her legs moved before her brain did. She followed him inside. The room was stark. Bookshelves lined one wall. A massive window let in the silver glow of the moon. At the center, a fireplace burned low and red. Lucian poured a glass of water, offered it to her. She hesitated, then took it. He didn't speak again until she had finished every drop. Only then did he say, There will be consequences. You've embarrassed a powerful male, shamed a council full of wolves with fragile pride. You've called me into something I didn't ask for. Her stomach turned. I know. He stepped closer, so close she could feel the heat of him again. But you're not wrong for doing it. That surprised her, more than anything else tonight. His voice dropped lower. I've seen what Kaelin is, what he does when no one's watching. Her throat closed. Lucian's gaze was unreadable. You don't owe anyone your body. Not fate. Not tradition. Not the moon. He stepped away before she could reply. The West Wing is yours, he said. You'll sleep there. You'll be guarded. You won't leave without permission, and you will never speak to him again. She nodded. Her heart was still pounding, but something in her chest shifted. The edge of terror dulled. Not vanished, but softened. You'll report to me at dawn, he added, already halfway through the door. Then he paused, spoke without turning. Don't leave your room tonight, and whatever you hear, don't come looking for me. He left. The door closed behind him with a heavy finality, and Vanya stood there, in the king's quarters, alone, burning with questions she couldn't ask, and a strange ache blooming low in her chest. Not from fear, from something colder. The feeling of walking out of a cage and into a forest where you don't know what hunts in the dark. Because tonight, she'd escaped her fate, but that didn't mean she was safe, not even close. And she was about to find out why. She woke to the sound of bells, not gentle ones, sharp, cold, too many, like an alarm that didn't care who it startled. Vanya jolted upright in the bed, disoriented, blankets tangled at her waist. The room was huge, moonlight spilling in through lattice windows. Not hers, not familiar. It took her a full breath to remember where she was. The palace, the West Wing, Sanctuary, and the Alpha King. Last night came back in pieces, her body on his lap, his voice in her ear. That awful, still silence before he rose and carried her out of the throne room. She touched her waist where his arm had been. Still warm, still real. The bells rang again. 3 short strikes. A knock followed, low and firm. She scrambled to the edge of the bed, bare feet hitting cold stone. Come in. The door opened. A woman stepped inside, tall, copper-skinned, dressed in sleek black armor. Captain Ara, the woman said. Her voice was steady, clipped, military. I'm to escort you to the king. Vanya blinked. Now? You report to him at dawn. You don't keep him waiting. Vanya almost asked why, but she didn't, because something about the captain's stare said questions had limits here. She dressed fast. Someone had laid out a simple tunic and boots beside the bed. No jewels, no gowns, just function. The walk through the hall was silent. Guards nodded as they passed. Not to her, to Ara. The king's presence radiated through the stone. This place wasn't a castle. It was a command. They stopped before a set of heavy double doors. Ara knocked once. A voice from inside. Enter. Vanya swallowed and stepped in. Lucian stood at the window. Back to her. Same posture. Same stillness. As if he'd never moved since last night. His voice was low. Come here. She walked to him. Every step louder in her head than in the room. He didn't turn. Tell me why you invoked sanctuary. Her throat tightened. He already knew. She could feel it. But this wasn't about explanation, it was about truth. I didn't want to belong to someone who sees me as property. Lucian nodded once. Still didn't face her. And you thought being mine would be different. Not a question. Not an accusation. A mirror. Held up to her fear. I didn't think I'd have a choice either way, she admitted. But at least, here, I might survive it. Finally, he turned. And gods, those eyes, amber, ancient, not cruel, but forged in something harder than steel. You will, he said, but not without cost. He crossed the room, picked up a scroll from the table, unfurled it. Read it. She stepped closer. The parchment was covered in inked law, old glyphs, wolf-write. She could barely translate it. except for one section, circled in red wax. A ward under sanctuary is bound to serve the throne in all things until release or death. Her eyes darted up. You own me now. He shook his head. I command you now, until you earn your freedom. She went still. He moved back toward the window, voice quieter. Sanctuary isn't protection. It's a pact. I protect you, and you serve, as soldier, spy, shield, whatever the realm requires. So I traded one prison for another, she said quietly. Lucian turned back, and for the first time something almost human flickered in his eyes. No, he said. You traded fate for choice. She didn't know what to do with that, didn't know if she believed it, but she nodded anyway. Lucian walked to a cabinet, took out a blade, short, silver-edged, curved like a fang. He handed it to her. Your first assignment starts tonight. Training, surveillance, and discipline. Her fingers closed around the handle, cold, heavy. I'm not a fighter, she said. You will be. Silence stretched between them. And then he stepped closer, lifted her hand with the knife, guided her fingers to the proper grip. Your strength isn't in muscle, he said. It's in the fact that you sat on a throne meant to destroy you, and didn't flinch. Their eyes met, and for a second something dangerous sparked in the space between them. Not desire. Not yet. But recognition. He saw her. Not as a ward, not as a burden, but as something that didn't break. She left the room with the knife still in her hand. Aura was waiting outside. You'll train in the South Court, she said. Don't be late. But as Vanya walked the long hallway, heart pounding in her chest, she wasn't thinking about training. She was thinking about the king, about his voice, his hands, his past. Because there was something behind those amber eyes, something buried deep, and the way he looked at her, he wasn't just warning her, he was daring her to come closer, which meant whatever he was hiding wasn't behind palace walls, it was inside him, and something told her she wasn't supposed to survive long enough to find it. The palace didn't sleep, not really, even in the quiet hours, when the moon hung heavy and the guards rotated shifts, there was always movement. Footsteps down stone halls, shadows in torchlight, low voices behind closed doors. Vanya couldn't sleep either, not with the blade Lucian had given her resting beside her pillow, not with the weight of his voice still echoing in her chest, not with the way his hands had wrapped around hers, firm, steady, too careful. She lay still on the silken sheets, watching moonlight crawl across the ceiling, thinking of what he'd said. You will serve, in all things. Not a threat, not a promise, just truth. She didn't know what he wanted from her, but she could feel it. There was something beneath his calm, something heavy, broken, tightly controlled, and it was starting to seep through the cracks. The scream reached her just after midnight, low at first, guttural, almost animal. Then it rose, raw, terrible, a sound pulled from deep pain, ripped straight from the throat of someone who'd long forgotten what it felt like to cry out. She was on her feet before she knew it. The scream echoed again, closer, down the corridor. Her door wasn't guarded tonight. Lucian had said she was safe here. But this didn't sound like safety. She grabbed the knife, moved fast, barefoot, quiet. The hallway was darker than before, colder. Flames in the sconces flickered wildly as if the air itself was pulling away from whatever was inside the king's chamber. The screaming stopped, not gently. It was cut off, abrupt, choked. Vanya's pulse hammered. She paused in front of the king's door, fingers hovering above the latch. She should walk away. He'd told her not to come looking, not to interfere, not to see, but something in her chest tugged. Not out of curiosity, out of recognition, because whatever had torn its way out of his throat just now sounded too much like something she'd felt before. She opened the door. No guard stopped her. No alarm sounded, just silence. And the king. Lucian lay on the floor, not the bed. The fireplace had burned down to embers. His back was against the stone, shirt soaked with sweat. His hands clawed at his chest like he was trying to rip something out. He didn't see her, didn't move. He was trapped somewhere inside himself, fighting shadows only he could see, and God's. His face. All the calm was gone, all the composure, the control, the steel. This was a man unmade. Vanya crossed the room slowly, kneeling beside him. Lucian. No response. His body trembled, not from cold, but from memory. He muttered something she didn't catch. Then again, louder. No, not her. Not again. His hands twitched. A low growl rumbled in his chest, but it wasn't directed at her. He was somewhere else. She touched his arm. Nothing. She leaned in closer, whispered, "It's not real. You're not there." He flinched, hard. His hand shot out, catching her wrist, pinning it to the floor. His eyes snapped open, glowing. Not gold, but white-hot silver, like moonfire caught in a storm. Vanya froze. His grip was strong, too strong. Pain laced her wrist, but she didn't speak, didn't panic. She looked straight at him and whispered again, "It's me." For a second, he didn't seem to understand, didn't seem to see her. Then, his eyes dimmed, the silver faded, his breathing slowed, his hand loosened. He blinked, like waking from a nightmare that had lasted too long. His voice was hoarse. "You weren't supposed to see that." She stayed where she was, kneeling on cold stone beside him, not afraid, not running. "You told me not to come," she said softly. "But I know what it's like to drown in your own head." He looked at her for a long time, and not like a king, not like a male claiming dominance, but like a man who hadn't let anyone close in years, and was still deciding whether it had been a mistake. "Why did you come?" he asked finally. "Because no one should have to face that alone." Lucian's eyes flicked to the fireplace. His shoulders sagged. Silence settled again, thicker this time, heavy with something unspoken. He didn't thank her, didn't apologize, but he let go of her wrist, and slowly he stood. Without a word, he walked to the window. She followed. The moon outside was full, massive, red-tinged. Wickedly beautiful. A hunter's moon. Vanya watched him as the light bled across his face. His voice came again, quieter than before. "I'm cursed, Vanya." She said nothing. "I don't bleed. I don't age. I don't rest." His hands flexed against the windowsill. "Every time I close my eyes, I see her." She waited. He didn't say who, didn't need to. Loss had its own language, and he was fluent. "I thought if I ruled long enough, buried it deep enough, it would fade, but it's always there, waiting." Vanya stepped closer, not touching him, just standing near enough that he'd know she was still here. "You saved me from one kind of prison," she said. "Let me help you out of yours." Lucian turned toward her slowly, that look again, like she was something he hadn't expected, something dangerous in all the wrong ways. And for a moment, just one, his hand almost reached for her. Almost. But instead, he stepped back. His voice dropped low. "You don't want to see what I've become." But she already had. And what scared her wasn't what she saw tonight. It was how much of it looked like her. The garden was too quiet. Vanya walked between rows of moonlit silverleaf trees, her knife tucked at her side beneath the soft folds of her tunic. It was supposed to be safe here. The courtyard behind the west wing was surrounded by guards, protected by the king's wards, off limits to anyone outside the royal command. And yet, she felt it, the shift in the air, the scent that didn't belong. Not the flowers, not the fire herbs, something sharper, familiar. She turned too late. He was already behind her. Kaelin. Her pulse jumped. He stepped out from behind the tree like he belonged here, like this moment had been planned. His shirt was open at the throat. His smile was tight. But his eyes, they were wrong. Too calm, too still. You didn't think I'd let it end like that, did you? Vanya backed up a step. Her hand moved toward the knife. Kaelin didn't flinch. The sanctuary stunt? Bold. I'll give you that. He circled her slowly, not touching, just watching. But you and I both know it won't last. You're mine, Vanya. That flame doesn't lie. She laughed once, sharp, bitter. Then maybe it's time we stopped worshipping fire. He moved faster than she expected, closed the distance in a blink, grabbed her wrist, the one still bruised from Lucian's nightmare grip. She hissed. Kaelin leaned in close. You think hiding behind the king makes you untouchable? His breath was warm, rotten with entitlement. Vanya's heart thundered, but she didn't cower. You think touching me now won't cost you? Kaelin's smile twisted. I'm not here to fight you. His fingers grazed her jaw. I'm here to remind you. You can't break a bond with willpower. You need permission. You need the moon. And guess what? His hand drifted lower. She never gave you a way out. Vanya's fingers curled around the hilt of her blade. But before she could draw it, a shadow dropped from above. Fast, silent, explosive. Kaelin was on the ground a heartbeat later, pinned. Lucian stood over him, one hand clamped around Kaelin's throat, the other glowing faintly with heat. His voice didn't rise, didn't need to. Touch her again, Lucian said, and I'll make sure your own pack won't recognize what's left of you. Kaelin choked, clawing at his grip. Lucian didn't ease up. He looked at Vanya, eyes calm, but beneath that calm was something old and wild. You all right? She nodded, barely. Lucian turned back to Kaelin. His voice dropped lower. You think the moon chose her for you? He leaned in, close enough to whisper. Maybe she changed her mind. He released him. Kaelin hit the dirt, coughing, eyes burning. Lucian stood tall. Power rolled off him in waves. You're not welcome here, he said. Step onto palace grounds again and I will end you. Officially. Kaelin rose slowly, but there was no fight left in him. Only pride. Only the deep, festering rage of a wolf denied what he thinks he owns. He spat at Lucian's feet. I won't forget this. Lucian's voice was cool as ice. Good. Kaelin disappeared into the trees without another word. Lucian didn't watch him go. He turned to Vanya instead, took a step toward her. You should have called the guards. She sheathed her knife. I was about to. His gaze flicked to her wrist. The bruise. His jaw tightened. He took her hand gently, lifted it, studied the mark Kaelin had left. His touch wasn't possessive. It wasn't even tender. It was furious, quietly, dangerously. You won't carry this alone, he said. She met his eyes, and for the first time, she didn't just see the king. She saw the man underneath, the one who hadn't slept, who still bled memories in the dark, who had chosen, for reasons he hadn't named yet, to stand between her and everything she feared. She whispered, Why are you protecting me? Lucian let her hand fall, turned, and for a second, She thought he wouldn't answer. But then he spoke. Soft. Low. Like it hurt to admit it. Because I've seen what happens when no one does. He walked away. Didn't wait for thanks. Didn't check if she followed. Just disappeared into the night like a man who didn't want to be a hero, but couldn't stop being one anyway. Vanya stood there alone, her heart loud in her chest. The garden was quiet again. Too quiet. But she knew better now. Because if Kalen had the moon behind him, then who exactly was standing behind Lucian? And if it wasn't fate, what kind of power was watching her from the shadows? Vanya didn't sleep that night. Again. She sat by the fire in her chamber, blade across her lap, wrists still sore, mind spinning. What had happened in the garden wasn't just a warning. It was a message. Kalen wasn't letting go. Not her. Not the bond, not the power tied to her name. And Lucian, he hadn't just stepped in. He'd put himself between her and a sacred decree. Wolves didn't do that. Not for strangers, not even for blood. And yet he had. She traced the old wolf glyph etched into the knife's hilt. It meant watcher, but another line crossed through it. Older, fainter, a second glyph beneath the first. Forgotten. She stared at it. She'd seen it before, in her grandmother's archives, in the old stories, the ones whispered, not taught. Moonborn, not a rank, not a gift, a curse wrapped in bloodline. They weren't supposed to exist anymore, but something in her gut, deep and quiet, said it had never left her. It had just been waiting. She stood. The fire snapped behind her, and she crossed the room to the small locked chest beneath her window. Inside, a satchel of scrolls, half-burned, hidden since her mother's death. She hadn't opened it since the choosing rite, but tonight, something called her back to it. She unfurled the scrolls on the floor. Old ink, faded edges, family seals long scratched out. And there, buried in ceremonial code and forgotten dialects, she found it. A passage written in the tongue of the first wolves. If one marked by the moon rejects her binding, her power shall awaken by will, not design. She is not fate-bound, but flame-born. Her blood chilled. She read it again, then again. It didn't just mean she had rejected Kalen. It meant the moon's pull wasn't broken. It had been rerouted. Vanya stood quickly, scroll in hand, heart racing. She needed answers, real ones. And there was only one place in this palace that might still hold them. The catacombs beneath the High Archive. A place forbidden to anyone who hadn't taken the oaths of legacy. She slipped through the palace halls in silence. No guards challenged her. The night cloaked her movements like it wanted her to see what had been hidden. She reached the old archive doors, pressed her palm to the iron handle. The door didn't open, but something inside it unlocked. Her mark burned faintly, like it recognized the place. The lock gave way with a soft click. She descended the spiral stairs. Dust clung to the walls. Torches flickered with blue fire. The air smelled of parchment and age. And then, at the base of the stairs, she found it. The old archive chamber. No windows, no guards, just shelves carved into the stone itself. The symbols here weren't modern. They were clawed, etched by hand. Records from when wolves first walked in two skins. And in the center of it all, a pedestal, holding a single book, black leather, no title, just a single sigil burned into its spine, the same glyph on her knife. Watcher. She opened it slowly and found her family's name on the first page. Not Emberclaw. The name before Emberclaw. Before the council erased it. Before history was rewritten. Velrena. A bloodline marked by prophecy. Feared. Buried. Erased. Her breath caught. She turned pages faster. The prophecy was fragmented, but the bones of it were there. A daughter of Velrena will reject her mate and claim sanctuary not by law, but by instinct. She will awaken the bondless king. She will become his reckoning, or his ruin. She stopped reading. Her hands were shaking. Her skin prickled. The bondless king. Lucian and be... She didn't know if it meant him, didn't know if it meant her, but it had begun. The scroll crackled as she rolled it back. She didn't hear the footsteps behind her, only the shift in air. By the time she turned, Lucian was standing in the doorway. No sound, no torch, just him, tall, still, watching. "How did you get down here?" he asked. Her pulse jumped. "I followed a truth." His gaze flicked to the open book, then to her hands. "You're not supposed to be here." "I think I was always supposed to be here." Lucian stepped inside. The flame from the wall cast strange light across his face. He wasn't angry. He was wary. And gods, wary looked more dangerous on him than fury ever had. "That book is cursed," he said. "Or prophetic," she answered. He stared at her for a long time. Then, "What did you read?" "Enough. Tell me." Vanya held his gaze, steady, unmoving. "You've been bondless your whole life." Lucian's jaw tensed. "That's not public knowledge." "It doesn't need to be. The moon didn't mark you. She avoided you." He took a slow step forward. "You should leave this room." But she didn't move, because she could feel it now. The pull wasn't coming from the prophecy. It wasn't in the book. It was in him. The same slow, magnetic hum she felt in her bones every time he entered a room. The kind that wasn't fate. It was will. And it was growing. "Vanya," Lucian warned, voice low. "Don't say what you're about to say." But she already had. Even if she didn't speak it out loud, she saw it in his eyes. Recognition. That deep, reluctant ache of someone who hadn't wanted to care again, and suddenly realized it was already too late, because something was happening between them, and it wasn't fate. It was choice. Old, wild, forbidden, and it had just been seen by the one person who could break it all apart. The scent of blood reached the palace before the news did. Not fresh, old, dried into fur, pressed into boots. It came with the morning riders, 5 wolves on dark stallions, their banners marked with crescent blades and broken oaths. Kaelin's crest. They didn't request entry. They didn't bow at the gate. They came through the northern path, unguarded, unannounced, moving like they had something sacred behind them. And they did. A challenge. Vanya watched from the high tower window, arms folded across her chest. Beside her, Captain Ara's jaw was clenched. "They weren't invited," Ara muttered. "No," Vanya said quietly. "But they were expected. Because no wolf like Kaelin bows to rejection without a fight. And this wasn't about love. It never had been. This was about power. And humiliation. And the fact that she'd made him bleed in front of witnesses, by walking away. Ara turned sharply. "Stay in this wing. If anything happens..." "Something already has," Vanya whispered. She could feel it. The shift in the wind. The tremor in the stone. Something under the palace was stirring. Old magic, angry magic, woken too soon. Down in the courtyard, Lucian stood facing the riders. He wore no armor, no crown, just a black tunic and silence. The wind caught his hair, silver at the edges, eyes bright with something close to warning. The rider in front dismounted, unrolled a scroll. Spoke loud enough to shake the mountain. "Alpha King, Lucian Blackthorn, by the law of the Northern Accord, your right to sanctuary has been formally challenged. Your ward is not of royal blood. The bond has not been broken. The choosing remains in effect, and your interference is considered an act of war. Gasps from the guards, the scribes, the wolves in the upper balconies. But Lucian didn't blink. He stepped forward, slow and deliberate. "You bring law into my house?" he asked quietly. The rider hesitated. Lucian's voice dropped lower. "There's no law higher than mine here." The scroll caught fire in the rider's hands. He yelped, dropping it, flames licking up his arm before vanishing into ash. Lucian stepped over the remains. "Tell Kalen if he wants war, he better be ready to lose more than pride." The rider stared at him, then turned and mounted. No reply. But the message had been sent, and war doesn't always wait for agreement. That night, the palace didn't sleep. Guards doubled, gates closed, ravens flew in every direction. And in the middle of it all, behind the locked doors of his war chamber, Lucian stood over a map lit by candlelight, tracing his finger over old borders. He didn't look up when Vanya entered. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I'm already here." He exhaled slowly. Didn't turn. Didn't tell her to leave. He pointed at a mark on the map. 3 packs have turned neutral. That's 3 fewer allies than we had 2 days ago. She stepped closer. "What do they want?" His hand curled into a fist. "To see me fall." Silence. Vanya crossed her arms. "I thought wolves didn't challenge the king." "They don't." He looked at her then. Something wild in his stare. Not fear, not rage. Betrayal. "They're not challenging the throne. They're challenging me." Her voice dropped. "Because of me." Lucian's jaw tensed, but he didn't argue. Because it was true. A ward who wasn't supposed to survive. A choosing broken in daylight. A king who touched what traditions swore was off limits. She ran her fingers over the edge of the map. "What happens if you lose?" Lucian met her eyes, flat, unblinking. "Then everything I've built burns." His voice was too calm, too steady, like he'd already accepted the fire. She took a breath, then stepped closer. "I want to help." "No, I'm not asking." He shook his head. "You're not ready." "I wasn't ready when I claimed sanctuary either," she said. "But I did it, and I survived." He looked away, but not before she caught it. The flicker of something beneath the armor. Not anger. Fear. Lucian Blackthorn, King of Kings, was afraid. And it wasn't of dying. It was of losing control. Of losing her. "Fine," he said finally. "You want to help?" He slid a parchment toward her, thick, sealed in wax. "Memorize this. Deliver it to the elders in the Grey Forest. Alone." Her pulse jumped. "You're sending me out there now? With Kalen watching every road?" His voice was low, deadly. "Let him watch." She took the parchment. It shook in her hand, just slightly. But her voice was steady when she answered. "I'll leave tonight." He watched her, said nothing, didn't stop her. And that terrified her more than anything else. Because Lucian never let people go, unless he wasn't sure they'd return. She left his chambers with the parchment tucked into her sleeve. The air outside was colder now. The wind whispered strange things, warnings, prayers. And as she passed through the courtyard under cover of night, boots silent on stone, she didn't notice the silver-eyed shadow perched above the gate, watching, waiting, smiling, because Kalen had heard everything, and his next move wasn't war. It was something far worse. The forest swallowed her whole. No guards, no carriage, no safety net, just Vanya, alone, with a sealed message pressed to her ribs and a blade strapped to her thigh. The air was sharp, cold, smelling of moss, bark, and something older, something watching. The moon bled through the trees above, half-shadowed, like it couldn't bear to look directly at her. Her instructions were simple. Follow the ridge north. Reach the gray forest. Find the elders. Deliver Lucian's message. But simple didn't mean safe. Not with Kaylin loose. Not with magic shifting under her skin like a second heartbeat. Not with her every step echoing across ground that remembered blood. Hours passed, maybe more. She stopped counting time the moment the woods turned too quiet. Then, she felt it, a prickle across her skin, the sudden stillness of the trees, the way the wind stopped breathing, and then the voice. You shouldn't have come alone. Kaylin. He stepped from the shadows like he belonged to them, tall, calm, dead-eyed. Not the wounded, snarling wolf she'd faced before. This one smiled. Not a grin, not even teeth. Just confidence. He didn't speak again. He didn't need to. The wolves behind him did it for him. 3, maybe 4, eyes glowing. Bodies tense, not attacking, yet. She drew her knife. Kaylin shook his head. You're still pretending you're a threat. I'm not pretending, she said softly. Then prove it. He lunged. Fast. Too fast. She dodged just in time, blade grazing his arm. He hissed. The wolves behind him surged forward. But before they reached her, something tore through the trees. A wave. Of sound. Of power. Of heat. The wolves howled and scattered, whimpering, vanishing into the shadows. Kaylin froze. Vanya turned. Lucian stood at the ridge above them, eyes burning silver, breath heavy, chest bare, marks glowing across his torso like brands from another life. She hadn't heard him approach, hadn't seen him, but he was here, and he looked like he'd stepped out of a legend. Kaylin snarled, You followed her! Lucian didn't answer. He descended slowly, step by step, until he stood between Vanya and the male she'd once been forced to call her own. You've crossed into sovereign territory, Lucian said coldly. This forest doesn't belong to you. Lucian's power shifted. The trees bent inward. The moon flickered. It does now. Kaylin lunged. No warning. No roar. Just speed and violence. Lucian caught him mid-air. The two collided in a flash of claws and shadow. The fight wasn't clean. It wasn't elegant. It was brutal. Flesh hit flesh. Magic flared. The ground cracked. Vanya stumbled back, clutching her side, dirt in her mouth, heart in her throat. She tried to rise, tried to speak, but the air itself turned against her, until something inside her snapped. Not pain. Power. It surged through her like lightning. Her hands glowed, her vision blurred. The mark on her neck, where fate had once burned, now flared with new heat. Lucian slammed Kaylin into the dirt. Blood, teeth, a roar so loud it shook the trees. But he was faltering, slower now, breathing heavier, a claw mark across his side bleeding too fast. Kaylin rose, Lucian's knees buckled, and that's when she moved. Vanya stepped into the clearing. No fear, no trembling, just clarity. She reached for Lucian, and the moment she touched him, the world changed. His wound sealed beneath her hand. Light spilled from her fingers, golden, pulsing, alive. Lucian gasped, looked at her. She saw it in his eyes. Recognition, not just of her, of the bond, not fated, not marked, chosen, by them, not the moon. Kaylin stared. What are you? Vanya turned, stared him down. Whatever he saw in her face, he backed away from it. You don't get to ask that anymore, she said. Lucian stood beside her now, stronger, steadier, marked with something older than blood. He didn't attack Kaelin again. He didn't need to, because Kaelin was already broken. Not by fists, not by teeth, by the truth. That power had passed him by, and it had chosen someone else, someone he couldn't control. Lucian stepped forward, spoke with quiet finality. "You set foot in my realm again, and I will tear your name from the earth." Kaelin turned and ran. Vanya stood in the silence that followed, chest rising, hands still glowing. Lucian turned to her. His voice was low, ragged. "You healed me." She nodded. "I didn't know I could." He looked down at her hands, then back at her. "What else don't you know?" Her lips parted, but no answer came, because she didn't know what she was becoming. Not entirely, only that something inside her had changed, not unlocked, unleashed. Lucian didn't smile, didn't speak. He just took her hand, slowly, and pressed it to his chest. His heartbeat was strong and fast, like hers, like something ancient had finally recognized its twin. But this wasn't peace. It wasn't victory. It was the beginning of something far more dangerous. Because whatever had just awoken in her wasn't done, not even close. They didn't chase him. Lucian could have ordered it, could have sent Ara or the royal guard to drag Kaelin back in chains, could have made it loud, final, public. But he didn't. He just watched the trees where the shadow had vanished. And then turned to Vanya. She hadn't moved. Still standing in the clearing where power had burst out of her like fire from a cracked wall. Her breath was steady now. But nothing else was. The glow under her skin had faded, but it wasn't gone. It waited, quiet, curled around her bones like something claiming space. Lucian reached out and tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. His hand was warm. "You shouldn't have taken that risk," he said softly. "You shouldn't have followed me." He smiled, barely. "I told you not to come looking for me once, remember?" She met his eyes. "I remember everything." Silence wrapped around them. Not awkward, not uncertain. Something was changing. Not between them, within them. The bond, whatever it was, wasn't just magic now. It was personal, intentional. Lucian finally spoke again. "The council will demand blood for this. Yours or mine? Both." He stepped away. His strength had returned. She could feel it in the way the air shifted around him. "I need to end this," he said. "Not for revenge, for peace." "Then let me stand with you." He paused. "I've seen enough people I care about stand too close." "That's not an answer." His eyes met hers, sharp, unyielding, but not closed. "Then come," he said. "But once this starts, there's no turning back." The war room pulsed with tension. Elders, generals, high-born wolves who had served Lucian since before Vanya was born, all watching him, all waiting. The king of Shadow and Flame stood before them, unarmored, uncrowned, and more dangerous than he had ever looked in full regalia. "The challenge ends tonight," Lucian said. One of the council members rose. "Without trial? Without negotiation?" Lucian's voice didn't rise. "Kaelin crossed sacred ground, broke the borders, drew blood. He has forfeited trial." Another elder growled. "You cannot execute a chosen without consequence." Lucian looked at him and said nothing. The elder sat down. Vanya stood at the edge of the room, silent, invisible. But Lucian's eyes flicked to her. Once. Quick. And that was enough. She knew. She was his witness now. Not just to truth, to legacy. Kaelin didn't resist when they dragged him into the chamber. 2 guards, 1 healer on standby. His face was bruised, his pride worse. He didn't look at Lucian. didn't look at Vanya. He looked at the empty throne. Still haven't claimed it? He sneered. You're more coward than king. Lucian didn't react, didn't blink. Do you know what your bond became when she chose sanctuary? Kaelin laughed. Dry. Hollow. A lie. Lucian nodded. No, a threat. To her, and to the law. He stepped forward. Kaelin rose from his knees, chest heaving. Hands shaking. You think you're any different than me? He snapped. You think she's safe with you? Vanya's voice cut through the room before Lucian could speak. She's safe with herself. Every head turned. Lucian didn't smile, but he stepped aside. Let her come forward. She walked to the circle, looked Kaelin in the eye. You were given a bond. I was given a warning. You don't get to rewrite the prophecy. I didn't rewrite it, she said softly. I survived it. Kaelin's hands balled into fists. You've cursed us all. Lucian spoke then. No. You cursed yourself the moment you mistook possession for love. He turned to the guards. Strip his title. Burn his crest. Mark him banished. The order rang through the chamber like thunder. Gasps. Whispers. But no resistance. Because this wasn't vengeance. This was judgment. Final. Unshakable. The guards dragged Kaelin to his feet, and as they led him away, bloodied, stripped of name, stripped of future, he didn't scream. He didn't fight. He only looked back. Once. Not at Lucian. At Vanya. And in his eyes, regret. Not for what he'd done, but for the fact that he'd lost something he had never been strong enough to hold. After the chamber cleared, Lucian stood at the base of the throne. Vanya joined him. He stared at the seat. Massive. Empty. The weight of hundreds of years staring back. You're not going to sit? She asked quietly. I will. When? When it means something. She stepped closer. What will it mean? His gaze turned to her. That I didn't destroy everything trying to protect it. And that silence. That moment between them. It cracked open something deeper than any battle ever could. Because war ends fast, but rebuilding trust, that takes blood, and scars, and someone willing to stay after the fire dies down. And that was what they were about to learn. The palace was quiet for the first time in days. No banners, no war calls, no guards running to their stations, just stillness, earned, heavy. Vanya walked through the north wing, past tapestries older than memory, her fingers grazing stone that still felt warm from everything it had witnessed. They had survived. But survival came with its own silence. Lucian hadn't summoned her. Not since the banishment. Not since she'd stood in front of the council and said what no wolf had dared say out loud. That being chosen didn't mean being owned. He'd let her speak. He hadn't stepped in. And something about that still echoed louder than any vow. She reached the chamber door and paused. No guards, no sound, just one flickering light beneath the heavy wood. She knocked once, no answer, so she entered. Lucian sat by the window, uncrowned, uncloaked, bathed in silver moonlight like a ghost made real. His eyes flicked toward her, then back to the window. No words, not yet. Just shared breath. She stood beside him. The silence didn't scare her this time. Why didn't you sit the throne? She asked. His jaw tightened. I did. She frowned. When? He looked at her. Right after they left. After Kaelin. After you. And? I sat, and I waited to feel something. Did you? Lucian's voice dropped lower. Only one thing. What? That I didn't want to sit there alone. Vanya's heart pulled tight. Lucian rose. The window light hit the scar on his side, where Kaelin had struck him, where she had healed him. The mark was still there, but different now. Not raw, not angry, just present, like it belonged. He stepped closer. You did something in the woods that no one's ever done. You've probably said that to a lot of girls, she replied quietly. He didn't smile. He didn't have to. I don't mean the magic. She looked up. His voice softened. You stayed. It took her a moment, but then she answered. I didn't know how to leave. Lucian's gaze didn't flinch. Neither do I. And that was the real confession. The one buried beneath years of command, of solitude, of surviving at the cost of connection. He reached for her hand, but didn't take it. He let it hover there, like an offer, not a claim. She looked at it, and then took it. No bond flared, no prophecy sang, just skin against skin, warm, quiet, willing. Lucian stepped closer. His forehead touched hers. The breath they shared was softer than any vow. I don't want fate, he said. Good, she whispered. Because I choose you, and I want that to matter more. The room shifted around them, not physically, not magically, just real, the way moments do when they mean everything. And neither of them said another word, because sometimes silence says what wolves can't, that healing is not loud, that choosing is not weak, that love, when it's real, doesn't roar, it stands. The next morning, the high bell rang once, not for war, not for mourning, but for recognition. The Alpha King had returned to the throne, not because he had to, because he was ready. And beside him, not behind him, stood the girl who had once defied the moon. She didn't wear a crown, didn't ask for a title, didn't change her name. She stood with her spine straight, her voice quiet, her eyes locked on the wolves who once thought she had no right to survive. And the realm didn't cheer. It bowed, not because of her power, but because she had given it back its king, not with force, with choice. And far beyond the palace gates, where the woods still whispered and the old stones still remembered, a prophecy rewrote itself, not in fire, not in fate, but in freedom, because some stories don't end when the war does. They begin when someone finally decides not to run,